This process of designing and constructing something is so difficult and challenging. And you need to, as a designer or an architect, show up in so many different ways. Being good stewards of people's kind of finances. There are so many layers to this that we as architects and builders need to be participating in. This is somebody's life. They're going to build a home themselves and their family. They're going to spend a significant amount of time and money. We need to be helpful in all that, stewards of all that, sympathetic and really help these people. And we need to care, like you have to show up and actually care about what you're doing. If you don't care, people are going to feel it on that other end.
Welcome to Modern Craftsman Podcast. Today, we are joined by architect and entrepreneur Matt Arnold. He is the founder of Arnold, which is a design studio redefining how architecture, development, and construction intersect. We're going to dig into what it means to grow a business with intention, the power of decision-making in design, and how becoming both a father and a founder reshaped his perspective. This one's about craft, clarity, and carving your own path while leaving the door wide open for collaboration and opportunity.
Hey, before we get into this conversation, thanks to our sponsors, Andersen Windows. If you're looking for windows and doors that give you more options, the Andersen E-Series product line might be your perfect solution.
Andersen E-Series windows and doors put the power in your hands, giving you more design flexibility and freedom. From custom colors and finishes to dramatic sizes and shapes, you can tailor every project to meet your exact specifications. Whether you're designing a sleek contemporary space or a timeless traditional home, the E-Series has the versatility to help you achieve exactly what your client is looking for.
And like all Andersen products, it's built on quality. E-Series products have extruded aluminum exteriors that are made to perform. So when you're looking for a very specific solution for windows and doors, you can trust your home to Andersen. For more information, head over to andersenwindows.com/moderncraftsman. Also, thanks to Buildertrend. If you're building a semi-custom home, you know the drill. Every project's kind of the same. Until a client wants to move a wall, upgrade a finish, maybe add a wine cellar. Does it sound familiar?
Buildertrend just dropped an ebook made specifically for builders like you. It's packed with real strategies to streamline your process, deliver high-quality work, and grow your business without losing your weekends.
So this isn't fluff. It's legit. It's practical advice. It helps you scale while you're keeping your sanity. So if you're ready to go from just keeping up to dialing things in like the other top builders, head over to buildertrend.com/MC playbook, download it, read it, and start winning more jobs your way. Thanks to Velux. Have you ever wished you could put one more window in a living room or wondered how to add more natural light to a space like a bathroom or maybe even a closet? With Velux skylights, you can enhance any space with natural light, making your room feel bigger, brighter, and better.
And natural light is always enhanced by fresh air. Velux skylights open to let in fresh air from above, and built-in rain sensors close at first sign of bad weather. The best part about skylights, you can add all the features of a window to your client's home without sacrificing privacy. Visit veluxusa.com/remodeler to find a Velux product that will add natural light to any space in your build.
And also thanks to Harnish, our workwear partner. Through unwavering focus, physical discipline, and devotion to mastering their craft, Harnish just doesn't make workwear. It sets a new standard for how they show up, both on and off the job. This is more than just clothing. It's a commitment to lifestyle of growth, performance, and elevated purpose.
The new H-Label line is changing the game. You get high-quality work uniforms with performance-grade fabric that moves with you, not against you. No excessive bulk, no second-guessing your brand image, just sharp, professional design backed by innovative fabric tech that protects like a multi-layer system while wearing like a single layer.
And when it comes to printing your logo, it's dialed, clean, durable, and consistent every single time. It's built for the field, designed for the future, and tested by the industry. Harnish, elevate what you wear, own what you build. Find more information at harnishworkwear.com. Make sure you click that partners link up top and get a special promo code being a Modern Craftsman listener. So, Matt, I met you when you were with another firm in Boston, for an architecture firm. You actually mentioned it as a design firm. So was that intentional? Like, is it not an architecture firm, it's a design firm?
It's an architecture and design firm. Yeah, I think the two
What
go
ca-
kind of hand in hand.
so but unpack that, because I think a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are listening, be like, that's the same thing.
Right.
Why is that, like, why is that different?
Well, I think an interesting question. I think there's a lot of architecture firms in Boston, and there's a lot of architecture firms who kind of stay in their wheelhouse of architecture. I think the previous firm I was at, I think we could say the name if it's okay, Haseen Architects, transcends the normal box of kind of being a built, an architect who builds. They do builds, they do architecture, but they do so much more in terms of interiors, in terms of branding, graphic design, kind of being a thought partner. They kind of really encompass the whole realm of design in
Mm.
architecture, not just being an architect. And I think that was, a pretty powerful thing. And it's also something that sets them apart pretty well, I think, in this industry.
Has that
How
always been like relevant within your industry, or is that something new?
I think that's a bit new. I think
Yeah.
David, was a kind of a trendsetter there. He very early on realized like he wanted to have all of those parts in house, and so that the complete story of a project from start to finish could be told.
Mhm.
And compared to hiring an architect, then hiring a separate interior designer, and there having been collaboration, and then even in the hospitality world, hiring a branding consultant, bringing that all in house and talking about all three of those disciplines in one parallel line from start to finish is something kind of unique. Not every firm has the ability to do that. And I think it was, again, it was something very unique about Haseen.
I look back at when I first started using architects, and even a lot of the architects that we've interviewed over the years, and I feel like most of their outlook and just vision is more objective and utilitarian. Where it's
Mm,
like, hey, we're serving a function, right? This is for the process. This is in order to get through zoning and get our submittals done and get our approvals done, but not necessarily like this overwhelming vision behind it, which I think is pretty neat. But I'm sure that there's a lot of challenges that come from that. Like, I feel like you have this vision and you want so much for it, and you could probably get into it and be like, oh my God, it'd just probably be easier to design multifamily right now. And I'd probably make more money.
that's very true. Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like, I mean, just recently we worked with a smaller architect and sat down with them, and we were just chatting through his business model. And he's like, I'm all volume. It's just like, I get you what you need for permit, and then I stop.
Hmm.
Like, don't, I'm not going to tell you what kind of windows. Like, I'm giving you a permit set. If you have some questions, we'll spend a couple hours answering like our intent. But it's just, that's the way they operate. Where from my side, I really align with the way Haseen works, the way that you work, the way that these brand or these kind of all inclusive um, firms work, where they want to be part of the story from, like you said, the beginning all the way to the end. I've talked
Yeah.
about before where, one of the most fun projects that we ever did was this project that the client literally left all his belongings and said, throw everything away. I want a brand new place, and I want everything brand new when I show up. And I remember the designer, her eyes lit up. She's like, everything? He's like, everything, silverware and all. And it was, I remember finishing that job, and we're cleaning up, and they're putting new silverware and towels, and it was just a way different experience. And I think for me, that's how I want to operate anyway. And I can think about the other side of that, where it's like you spend all this time, beautiful design, execution, and then the client moves in, and it's like, oh, their furniture sucks. It's like, I can't photograph this room, or it's like, or I got to stage it, or you just fall, like, it's like you fall in love with it. It's like when you buy a new car and you put your kid's only 14 weeks old, but eventually when they're 5 and 6 and 7, and you get a brand new car and they get in and they make an absolute mess out of it. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I thought we collectively were getting a new car. Looks like only I believed in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is very true, and there are a lot of architects that operate in that realm. And I think David and the firm had that feeling early on, and so wanted to kind of get their arms around it. So they started to bring in these other elements in house, so that they didn't have to worry about that. Because you're right, like especially in Boston, especially Boston proper, a lot of the work we do is interior architecture, right? We're not necessarily constructing new buildings on every corner, right? So Haseen does do ground up new buildings, facades, but a lot of the residential work is kind of more interior. So you can put all this effort into paneling and beautiful kitchens and living spaces and fireplaces. And you're right. If somebody brings in furniture, regardless of whether you think it's attractive or not, but doesn't work with the concept of the space is unphotographable, right? And this is regardless of aesthetics, whether you like the furniture or not. If the furniture doesn't work with the space, it's not going to present itself well in a photograph, right?
I want to say something. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial because I think that I have an issue, not an issue. Your comment on the fact that most of Boston architecture is interiors, I agree with you. And I see projects around the world. You and I have both shared those projects around the world. And I feel like every time I see a condo, that like there's this one particular aesthetic, and I'm like, oh, that has to be in Boston. And it's always the same because I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think enough people here in Boston are pushing the envelope of what interiors could be. Not in residential. Like you talk about hospitality, you talk about retail for sure. But I feel like the residential world with these interior architecture projects primarily are the same thing. It's like you just rattled off. It's the fireplaces, the kitchen, it's bathrooms, and then maybe some flooring. But they're not taking it to an elevated level where I just think it's an underserved opportunity. And I'm not calling out anyone specifically. I'm not trying to backpedal here. I'm just saying that I think Boston in itself has the opportunity to really push interior architecture up a notch and produce at a much higher scale. And now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that does exist and I just don't see it. So I'd be curious what your thought is on that.
I mean, I think it does. I think you're right. Places like LA and New York have historically been a little bit more bold in terms of their architectural style, right?
Yeah.
I mean, LA, because they don't deal with the same kind of weather and thermal requirements that we do in New York, because it's New York, right?
What do you mean by that? Because I have something to compare.
Well, I think people are just a little bit more bolder sometimes in New York. There's people are okay making substantial financial investments into properties. Not that they're not in Boston, but I've seen that the caliber of that in New York can be quite different than here in Boston.
By like 4x.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, and some of that's because of the price of the property to begin with, right? Like,
but even like I had a builder on Instagram reach out and he was asking about something we were using at 45 White Oak, and he's like, oh yeah, we're using something similar. He mentioned the spec, and I'm like, Jesus, that's an expensive material. And he's like, yeah, well, it's a $250 million renovation project. And I was like, 250?
Quarter of a billion.
He's like, yeah. I'm like, is it a house? He goes, no, it's a penthouse in New York City. And I'm like, wait a second. Can't you build the high rise for 250 million? It's just to think about the fact that someone, like you said, just has the desire to put $250 million of money into a penthouse, however many floors it is, like doesn't even matter. But it's just Boston doesn't have that.
You could probably buy a state somewhere else.
For sure.
At least a town.
For sure.
Like I own this whole town for $250 million.
And the other guy's like, I have a penthouse.
Insane.
But I think, and so I asked a friend of mine who's just kind of tapped into the the real estate world here. I was like, dude, like, I don't understand how does New York, and it's not just one. I mean, uh, there's tons of them that are putting, you know, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in these buildings and condos, and in New York specifically. And it was interesting what he said. He was saying that Boston has that money and people live here, but they don't spend the 100 million here. They're spending it in Aspen or
Hmm.
in Florida or just somewhere else. Like they have a beautiful home here that they spend a couple tens of millions of dollars on, but it's not where they exhaust money like people in New York. And to your point, that's because it's New York.
I also feel like,
Yeah,
obviously, I'm not in Boston, but I think that it's a little bit more traditional and older, especially than LA.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think like the folks here are a little bit more traditional in nature. That can equal sometimes being a little bit more reserved in the types of aesthetics that they do.
Hmm.
Where, at my previous firm, we did start to see, they were starting to do quite a few second homes. And that second home market is definitely a place where people are willing to be more adventurous with their money, with their home, with the establishment. Um, than maybe they were with their Boston brownstone. I mean, we had clients that we did projects for. Their two different homes in two different locations were very different. Their Boston
Mm.
home felt Boston, and their remote home, whether it was, you know, on the Cape or out west, had a different aesthetic to it. And they were kind of willing to be a little more playful with that. And some of that could have to do with the maturity of the Boston market. Like, if you build something too specific to you, people are always a little bit afraid that it won't sell.
Hmm.
I don't know if maybe New York has just found a way to kind of get past that. Like, it just has that cool factor. So they always know it will sell if it's quality. Um, where I do think still here, people, they want to make sure whatever they do is for themselves now, but it still has that market value down the road.
Is your goal for your firm to have the same approach and mentality as the firm that you left?
In terms of
Just like,
holistic.
yeah, holistic design, and being able to handle more than just the execution of the architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, the one thing I really loved about, I mean, there's a lot of things I loved about working at my previous firm, but I did really love the cross collaboration between different disciplines. I mean, I'm an architect, I'm trained as an architect, I'm registered. I definitely come at things with a very particular perspective. And I did, although sometimes collaboration can be messy, I did like the challenge from the other disciplines in the office when they challenged my assumptions, when they challenged my ideas. Um, it usually resulted in a better result, right? Because there was somebody coming from a different perspective, asking me questions that I didn't think of. That is probably the biggest thing I'm missing right now in my own practice is I don't have that other discipline sitting next to me. But I am definitely working on ways to bring that collaborative nature back, but in a very different fashion. I'm not going to be able to mimic the process that I had prior. And so I'm very interested in trying to find a new way to do that. And that a bit of like the why the brand is kind of called Arnold and is it's to be open ended, right? To not
Hmm.
be solely about me being an architect, but to have the brand be rooted in me, but allows like this orbit of collaboration to kind of go around me, right? And so leaving the Arnold and as an opening allows me to really highlight my collaborators, whether it's a contractor or an interior
Hmm.
designer or a graphic designer, a fabricator, a mill worker, or the client. So it's a brand that's trying to celebrate the collaboration of outside entities collaborating with me as an entity, right? Instead of it all being under one roof.
Is
I
that
don't.
is that something that you feel like you developed, like, I guess further on in your career? I think a lot of that, like being like having an ability to collaborate and to welcome that collaboration with open arms, and not put up a wall or say, hey, we're not going to do this. Like, did that take a certain amount of experience and self-confidence to openly welcome that collaboration and some of those challenges, or was that something that you've done from the outset?
No, 100%. It took time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. As a younger designer, as a I guess a more immature designer, I certainly wanted to be, the loudest voice in the room, and there was many instances where I was. But I think over time, I definitely started to see the value and the result of these different disciplines, and really understanding what they did in comparison to what I did.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that took time. It's not something that I would expect anybody to get right out of the gate. And you have to develop some of that confidence. I look back 10 years ago, and unannounced to me, I think I've actually always been a confident person, but I didn't actually realize that. So it actually took me a while to even realize that I even did have the confidence. Like when people saw me, I think they did see a confident me, but I still had the apostrophe, right? And it's still there today in some ways. But yeah, like it takes time to develop all that confidence and to be able to sit back in the room and listen instead of talk. And that's really hard to do. I still find that hard to do with my clients. Like I want to say something because I have an idea, but I have to let them finish their idea because I really need to listen, right? I can't just try to trump them with what I think is a better idea in that particular second. It's hard. It's a challenge. It has not been easy.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that people don't realize, where it's like you're trying to gain experience and develop your skill set, and just really refine your craft. And the cheat code is to bring other people in and to listen to other people and have people challenge you. But it's so difficult while you're trying to develop that self-esteem and that own confidence within your ability to be able to be challenged and be comfortable with that and not have that affect your confidence. Because I think a lot of times at that point in our career, it's like we need things to be going right. We need to be the loudest person in the room. Like we have to convince ourselves that we know what we're doing. And when we're challenged, a lot of times it can hinder that confidence and actually make us take a few steps backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, honestly, I think it also, as an employee compared to the employer, it's a different dynamic. As the employer, as the owner, you automatically carry some confidence, and you hired these people, you brought these people together. So like it just feels like you're automatically a little bit more encouraging of that dialogue, where when you're an employee kind of slotted into somewhere, you're like kind of like you're saying, you're trying to find your space, you're trying to get your footing, you're trying to understand your groundwork in front of you and figure out how to operate in this kind of system. Um, so it's something that definitely took a bit of time. I've definitely recognized it, identify it, but I still have to be pretty conscious about it, even in my working, day to days now.
You said that you're not going to be able to structure your business the same way that Haseen had structured their business, as far as collaboration and integrating people into your business. Can you specifically put your finger on why you won't be able to do that? Or is that a decision, that you don't want your business to grow to a certain size? Or is this just going to be more of like a natural evolution?
Um, That's a good question. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say never because, a part of the kind of Arnold and strategy is like Arnold and architecture, could be Arnold and development. I'm also thinking of Arnold and living with maybe some product line stuff that I'm working on. And it could be Arnold and interiors. So I shouldn't say that I won't bring it in house, but right now the charge is I'm not trying to build an interior design studio, right? I want to collaborate with interiors folks because I very much value what they bring to the table in terms of a project. Um, But I'm not in a position to build out an interior design studio currently because I'm building my kind of architecture studio in many ways. But yeah, it's not out of the question. If the trajectory takes me in a particular way, and the right opportunities present themselves with the right folks, it's really about the people. The right partner or the right person came along, I'm open to anything if the right person comes along. I don't want to limit myself. That's part of the open-endedness with the brand is I don't want to limit myself. I didn't want to brand myself as just an architect day one, because what
Yeah.
about day 5,000? I don't know where I'm going to go. And that's been the most exciting thing about it. The whole thing is I don't know what's next.
So do you have a specific or at least like a quantifiable plan in place for the growth of your business?
No, I
Damn, a man after my own heart.
so many people this year have asked me, what is your 5-year plan? And I said, my 5-year plan is to not have a 5-year plan
Yeah.
because, I came from a place where there was a trajectory. It was a very nice trajectory. Um, but I left because I decided I didn't want to go in that trajectory anymore, and I needed to try something different. And I wanted to still be open-minded to possibility. And so it felt like in order to do all that, I needed to not have a plan in place so that I could take a sharp right turn when something cool came. And it's fine if I take a left back and get back on track. That's okay. But I really wanted that flexibility.
Do you think that's due to your career path and your industry? Being that it like those constraints or having that plan is going to limit your artistic or business freedom?
I think for me, it could have. For me personally, yes. Like just going down, if you're saying like going down the typical path, would that have limited me as a person? Yes, I think it would have. I think it would have limited my creativity. I think it would have limited, what other potential design avenues I go down in terms of development or product or other things. I think, yes, for me personally, it would have limited me. I don't know that it's that way for everybody, but
No, I don't think it is, and I think that you're probably going to run into and experience like the classic struggle that we all face when we go off on our own, where it's like, is my business going to grow, or in order to survive, do I have to grow my business or scale my business to the point where I don't get to do the things that I love as much anymore? And I think that's a real thing, and that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, and they find that their only opportunity for growth is to pull themselves out of the day to day or what they enjoy doing, and then start constructing and growing and orchestrating that business. And I think that 5 years before you know it, you look up and you're like, I'm not doing anything of what I wanted to do or why I went off on my own in the first place.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think luckily for me, I mean, first and foremost, I love architecture. I love design. I love getting into something and modeling it and drawing it. But it is not the thing I want to do every single day, all day in perpetuity, right? I like business. I like the pursuit of trying to get work. I love getting to know people and making relationships. I am a people person. I say as my wife to my wife, I am a pack animal. I do not roll well by myself. I get energy from other people. If I go to a business event, I come home, my wife's like, calm down, because I'm blah, 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 spinning from the energy that I get. And most people come home, they're drained, right? They're like, oh my God, that event was so much work. Not me. I come home on a super high. So I still love architecture, but I'm doing all of these architectural things right now to get me to the place where I can do exactly what I'm good at. And that's actually not the architecture. It's everything else, right? I need to put the people, my Julian, I need the people in place that are excellent at the architectural things, so it allows me to do what I do best.
It's funny. I was listening to another podcast, and I'm pretty sure I stopped and I was like, I need to write that down because it was so funny and so absolutely unrelatable as far as like me internally, but it was very relatable where you said so many people are good with people, but they are exhausted by people. And I was like, damn, that's me. Like I can be good with people, but when I'm done being good with people, I'm like, I am so exhausted right now. And it sounds like you're the opposite.
Complete opposite. At 8:30 on a Friday night, if I'm sitting home watching TV, I'm asleep. You put me in a room of people, I can go all night, like no problem. Because
I'm like in between you guys because it really depends on who I'm talking to. Like I can be at one of those events and just be like, I'm here because I have to be here. I'll talk to a handful of people. I'll go home, and I'm not rolling off a high. It's just like, all right, I did what I needed to do and made that one connection. But if the right topic comes up, I won't shut up. It's like
Interesting.
if the right thing happens, like the right topic, we go down a rabbit hole, I'll just sit there and chat forever. And it's at anywhere I go, even if I'm in a group of like our friends, usually I'm pretty quiet or I'll
Interesting.
chime in here and there. But if someone mentions a topic that I have any interest in, I'm like, all right, let's go. Like
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'll talk about this for
Interesting.
2 hours.
Interesting.
Was it the development of your own projects that were the impetus for you realizing that you have other passions and like this business and entrepreneurial spirits within you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm not really sure what drove me to develop some of my own kind of projects here in town, but yeah, early on doing that, like I got a particular high and level of satisfaction out of those projects that I hadn't quite gotten in the professional world. I mean, I've done some really amazing projects here in Boston, practicing as an architect, and those have been insanely gratifying. And I would, never give them up for anything. But yeah, developing my own projects, when I first did my first one back in 2016, I got out of that and I was like, wow, that was something different, right? There was a commitment there, there was a drive there was a gratification there. At the end, when that project was sold and the funds were distributed and my portion came to me, I was like, it didn't feel real, and it definitely kind of opened up something inside of me and made me want to pursue this more and more and more. I very much thought actually continuing to do the kind of side project development stuff was the path forward for me. But due to the real estate market and due to I tried to buy a couple of pieces of property. It didn't go well. Through that process, I realized actually that maybe that wasn't quite right, and that it really just needed to be me being entrepreneurial, me running the business, kind of doing my own thing is really what I needed to do. Like flipping some homes, yes, you can make some money, but it ultimately wasn't going to make me the happiest version of me.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was going to ask, if that project hadn't been as, financially successful, do you think that you'd have the same outlook?
I think so, because, I got, of course, there's the gratification when the check comes at the end, right?
Yeah.
But there was a year of gratification before that where I had zero clue whether I would make any money at all. I had no idea if I was putting all this time and money into this thing, if I would make a penny. I had zero clue. I never even really thought about it. I was just like, this is what I'm doing. I'm building my own product. I'm loving it. I'm making every single choice. I just loved it. And then when the check came at the end, it was like, wow, that just got even better, So I think even if that project didn't make any money, I still would have done it again.
Did you ever have that like intense feeling when you were practicing any sort of design, even if it wasn't in your professional design career, like when you first started dipping your toes into that world? Like, can you recall that you had that same lust for wanting to learn and just increasing your knowledge? Or I guess what I'm getting at is like a lot of times when I get into something new, I'm the same way where I'm like voraciously into it. And I wonder if I'm like, if I do this a couple times and then I get it licked and I figure it out, am I going to be on to the next thing? But that's probably just like the addict in me. Where it's like, all right, I got this figured out. I want something more. I guess that's where I'm getting at with that question. Like, is it just the hunger for more and to really just broaden your reach and become a more dynamic business owner or entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me it is like, again, I still am going to be an architect. I still want to be an architect, but I think that process made me realize there's more to just being an architect, right? Architecture is such a small piece of what an architect does, right? They do need to be a business owner. They need to be, a life coach. They need to be a marriage counselor. They need to be so many different things. They need to be a leader. They need to be sympathetic. There's just so many things. And I think doing my own project made me realize that being an architect and designer was one piece to a much bigger and more complex puzzle. And I was more interested in the bigger piece of the puzzle than just one small piece.
It's crazy to have that perspective. And I think a lot of times going through that process on your own, or even if you have a client that you're like emotionally close to more than. So I have a client who I worked for 15 years since I started in business. She got divorced. She lives on her own. Her mom's now sick. She's like, I'm working on a project with an architect with her, trying to get through that. And like, we now need a variance. And the zoning officer is giving me a hard time because I'm trying to get answers for her. Meanwhile, working with the architect, like the team put together, she's in the hospital with her mom getting like cancer removed from her body. And I'm like, there's a much bigger picture here than me just being a contractor. And oddly enough, it's like it's important to me, and I think that it's very satisfying in a weird way, like being able to take care of people in more than just the transactional sense. um and I can see that, like, if it's hard to understand that if your relationship with your clients, or you never see that internally through building your own project or working with your own family, or having clients that you consider to be closer than just that transactional relationship. But I think that there is a lot more to it than face value a lot of times, and people don't quite understand that.
100%. I mean, like, this process of designing and constructing something is so difficult and challenging. And you need to, as a designer or an architect, show up in so many different ways. I wasn't kidding about the kind of counselor and the, marriage counselor helping couples navigate this decision process, being good stewards of people's kind of finances, right? There are so many layers to this that we as architects and builders need to be participating in. This is somebody's life. They're going to build a home for themselves and their family. They're going to spend a significant amount of time and money. We need to be helpful in all that, stewards of all that, sympathetic, and really help these people. And we need to care. Like you have to show up and actually care about what you're doing. If you don't care, people are going to feel it on that other end.
How much of I know you built your own house. I think you're looking to build another house for your family. Like, how much did that experience teach you about how you need to cater your own business like process for clients?
Well, I mean, my previous boss, David Hassan, did say every architect should build their own house. And he is absolutely right, because you can put lines on paper all day long, but until you make a mistake and the contractor comes to you with a bill and
Yeah.
you have to write that check, wow, that's an eye-opening experience.
I also think from a decision making
Yeah.
perspective, like, you had mentioned that, architecture is fundamentally about decision making and knowing when to, pull a particular lever, right? Like when to spend, when not, when to peel back. But I think that is something that, from an architect's perspective, building your own home, sure, you're going to run into the mistakes and the cost of those mistakes, but also pressure you to consider, well, are these decisions I'm making from the architectural standpoint really something that matters, or am I just spending money, right? Where it's simply just for the sake of a small, we'll call them, moment. And I think
Right.
that's something, even building 45 White Oak, that is something that we have spared quite literally no expense on that home. And there's been countless conversations about, do I regret spending on certain things? Would I have done it differently? Would I have spent that? Would I have done that if I knew how much it was going to cost? And I can comfortably say no. I feel like we've approached this with a pretty, good understanding of what our intent was, and that we're not making foolish decisions. Um, but on the other hand, it's like, would I have spent that same amount of money if it was my own home? I think so. Um, but it's, but I think until you go through building your own home, it's almost as though like the emotional attachment. I think it really comes down to money. The emotional attachment
Yeah,
to
you're telling people to
money.
throw out all their furniture because it doesn't match.
I'm not telling people that. People are
I'm
telling
building my
me
own
to,
house. I'm like, I'm designing this whole house around this bed
this
to
one
save
couch.
$500.
But I remember when we did our Tuckerman house that my wife and I renovated. I'll never forget. The first thing we had to order was windows, and I decided to save $8,000 on windows because I didn't want to pay for the nicer ones, and I regretted it from the moment those windows showed up on my site. And I was
Absolutely.
like, that was just a stupid mistake. Like I should have paid it. I should have put the money where it mattered.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have my stories like that too. There are certainly a few things around my house that I look back and say, why did I cheap out on that? Why did I not do that? Well, we waited to put windows in after the fact, which is a pretty easy thing, but like
Sure.
to renovate your whole house, to have a brand new house and have shitty single pane windows that rattled and the wind blew, it made no sense. And at the time, the $7,000 seemed like the end of the world, but in
Right.
reality, it was nothing. And there's a few other things around here too that every day I look at and I'm like, man, if I had just dropped another $2,000, it would have saved me the last 7 years of headache. But
Yeah.
I couldn't have that perspective at the time. Every dollar seemed unsurmountable, every additional
Right.
dollar. And it was really hard. But I think, that is there's between that and the development, like having to have the vision, execute the vision, and then even in the development mode, sell the vision, really gives you this set of skills that, I didn't even know I would need as an architect, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everything I'm doing is around kind of selling in many ways, right? Selling ideas, selling concepts, not selling in terms of transactional, but like you're trying to get people on board with your thoughts, your ideas, your solutions for things, and that takes a lot of work to kind of bring people along, educate them through the process. And I think some of those experiences I had on my own were just they meant so much to me and developed me as the professional I am today.
We spend the beginning part of our career trying to sell all of that, and then I think it ends up getting a little bit easier, where it's like maybe the selling's not up front, it's more of the vision once you get going. But I think that like having the experience that you had with your own place and then being able to, like, how long have you been there now?
7 years now.
7 years. So being able to
That's huge.
live in that like makes that selling, whether it's on the front side, like in the middle of the design process, or on the back end, that much stronger, because like you were speaking from actual experience and you had financial stake in that project. And it's like, listen, at this point in my life, I didn't have the money to spend on this, but like, had I known what I know now, I 100% would do whatever I had. Like I'd sell a kid to be able to get this, because like it's make our lives so much easier. And I think that it's a good point. I think that most people, contractor or architect or interior designer, like should have to design their own space and be financially responsible
Mm-hmm.
for that undertaking in order to truly understand like a tenth of what our clients go through.
Absolutely, yeah. Being able to literally show up in a sympathetic way. I think I just was able to show up in a very different way for my clients after that. I really understood, it's painful going through this process sometimes. It's not easy. I mean, I always think the result is well worth the effort, but
Mm-hmm.
you guys know construction is not an easy thing, even when you have great construction partners. It's
I,
still
I
hard.
I think that this is where a lot of builders and a lot of our peers will talk about the fact that clients should just build smaller homes. They're trying to build the biggest home they can for the least amount of money. And obviously this comes back to client education. But on the flip side of what we were saying a minute ago, it's also really important to, like the window discussion, like the $8,000 I saved, not only, not just pushing the client to spend the $8,000 more, but explaining as to like, hey, this is an area that you should spend more.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that's going to be way more difficult to change or update later. You should really consider, kind of spending the money for this particular line item, and approach it, empathetically, and understand that a client's budget should be treated as if it was your own, but also educate them in a way that when they're making these decisions, they make sense. And
Absolutely.
if you're trying to build an 8,000 square foot home and you're cutting back on it by putting cheap windows in, is that really gonna net you a good outcome? Because I've always argued that a big reason why people leave their home or move or sell their home is because they're,
Neighbors suck.
that, but also that they unknowingly are just uncomfortable, and it's because of certain decisions that were made, and that, whatever it is, the lighting sucks, the windows suck, it's leaky, it's too hot, it's too cold, or it just, this is poorly laid out. Every time I walk around the island, I hit my corner on my hip on the corner of the island. There's all these things that show up, and we don't even know that we're just building this hatred towards the home. And instead of loving the home, we sell and we go and buy another one thinking it will, resolve the issue. When in reality, back to, an architect, and what an architect is, and essentially the decision maker, it's that whole process. It's why that role is so critical in this process, is that these are the things that matter to how someone lives in the home. And until you experience the bad, and it's hard to ever know what is appropriate. What I mean by that is you're designing multiple homes, right? So you're seeing this at scale where, one person lives in one home and then goes and builds a custom home, and they think that they can do it themselves, but they haven't experienced all the issues. So it's hard to know what works or what's going to be right, because they've only lived in one and they can only experience one. Where, as I said, an architect experiences this dozens and dozens of times, and every one adds, an education opportunity for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely learn. Every project has their kind of learning objectives, right? That we learn at the end. But you're right. That's the reason why people hire an architect, is to help them with that whole process, to make their way through. Um, there's the folks that kind of do plans, right? Like you kind of talked about that earlier. There's some people just do plans and they step away. And then there's architects that actually, help coordinate and execute the architecture. And that's staying involved, helping through all this crazy decision tree that needs to happen throughout the whole process. And, helping people like you, right? I mean, you've talked about this before, right? Like working on a project without an architect complicates your life as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a lot easier when there's an architect, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the decision tree, kind of helping you get the decisions you need from the client in a timely manner so that progress can happen. Otherwise, you and your team are spinning your wheels on site trying to figure out what to do next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, like I always say, if you don't draw it and it gets built, you own it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't draw it and it didn't show up the way you want it, well, you have to pay to have that redone. Where if you draw it and it doesn't show up the way you wanted it, well, then, there's discussions to be had. But
I have a funny story about that. We finished a job an undisclosed amount of time ago with an undisclosed architect, and we're done. Like the project's done. and they do a punch list walk, and we all agree on like a handful of punch lists, and then I get a formal document of punch list items, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, what is this? Like, and it was all these things that we didn't do, like basically build, and it was all these details that weren't built and based on the architect's intent. And I was like, wait a second, we don't we don't have those details. These don't even exist. And we had this conversation. It's like, yes, but that was the intent. And I'm sorry, I forgot that they were like, we didn't specifically call that out. And I'm like, guys, you're not getting this.
They were in my head.
We are done. This is not a punch list. I'm happy to do it. Not a punch list. Like, that is absolute, like, and it was, I would like to think that it was, no harm, no foul, but I was like, that was definitely a fast one,
Interesting. But it was just like in their head, they didn't communicate it on paper or anything, or just like
allegedly it was in the rendering,
yeah.
I was like, yeah, but no.
If you don't draw it, renderings only go so far.
Nobody was on site when those critical details were being executed.
I mean, we had 1,500 photos of that project throughout the whole project. Like, it could have been caught way earlier and would have been nothing. And it was just, everything's done, and it's like, oh wait, we forgot this. I'm like, no, I did not forget this.
Lesson learned.
It was not there.
Well, I can say I have not pulled that one before.
You should try it, see if it works.
So when you, obviously new business owner, new father, I think that I heard or read that like you decided you were going to start your own business and leave quote unquote corporate America, and you found out that your wife was pregnant like shortly thereafter. Like, the timeline was very close, right?
Yes. Yeah. I gave my notice on a Thursday, and Saturday my wife came like in the evenings and sat down and said, I need to talk to you.
Dude, she knew it before Thursday.
I think she did. She did. And she handed me a pregnancy test and was like, this doesn't change anything you're doing, but
okay.
I wish you had told me this on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So I guess where I'm getting at with that is like, all right, I think you said you're 42.
Yes.
Maybe I caught that at some point. So you're not young, but you're having your first child. You're leaving your job. You're starting your own company. Like, how scary was this? Or did you feel that like it's just time?
I mean, it was certainly scary. I mean, there was a lot of, yeah, it was hard. It was probably the hardest decision, I've had to make. One, because not only just leaving to start my own thing, but, like the folks that I was working with, I had been there for 15 years. They were my family. I had my mentor was there. Like, it was hard to just leave them as people, regardless of the whole kind of job thing, right? I wanted to be around these people every day because I had been around them for so many years. It was really hard to even think about the fact that I wouldn't see them every single day. So that was one aspect. The other aspect is, yes, going out on your own, needing to make your own living, generate your own income, and then also now having a newborn or a child to potentially care for, added so many levels of complexity. But I went into it with, again, the confidence. So much of this is just kind of building the confidence to be able to go out and do it, to know that I could win the work, to know that I could be okay. And it was hard, but I knew I needed to do it. It became a realization this year that this is something I needed to do. I needed to live out my version of my dream, and I had to do it and ultimately to be happy. And, I'm very glad that I did it. It's certainly had its challenges, but I think ultimately, like in hindsight, doing this while having a child actually worked out way better than I thought in many ways, because having the flexibility, I have total flexibility now. Like, my previous job I thought very flexible, and they were extremely flexible with me, but I didn't understand what flexibility meant until you work for yourself.
Hmm.
right? And I really had 100% total flexibility of what to do with my day, how to spend my time. Um, needing to go to doctor's appointments and be home with my wife while she's on leave, taking care of the kid. I love the fact that I was just before this, he was laying on the couch, doing some tummy time, and I got to hang out with him for 5 minutes. That is a pretty special thing that I definitely would not be able to get back.
How the hell do you have the flexibility that you do so new into business? Like, is this something that you were taught through mentorship? Is this you just taking structure from your past job? Because most people that I know like start their own business, and then they one of the golden carrots, right, is that they're going to have freedom, and then they start their own
Mm.
business and it's like, I have no freedom. So how are you structuring that?
Well, I mean, it seems like I have glimpses of freedom throughout the day, but you're probably right. I don't have a ton of freedom. Everything kind of stops with me. Everything runs through me. So I can't just step away from the business. Like if I go on vacation, the business doesn't run, right? And
Hmm.
that's a challenge. I'm ultimately going to have to work through that and figure out how the business can run while I'm not present. So it's, maybe in some ways it's a perceived freedom for right now, but the goal is to have more freedom down the road.
So when you made that decision, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't overnight, but did you, I know you don't have a 5-year plan, but what type of, I guess, like objective information did you use, if any, to understand that you were ready to go out on your own? Like, was it, hey, I need to look at my numbers. I need to know what we need to survive. I need to know how much work I need to land. Or was this like what I did, where it's just gut check and you're like, yeah, I think I can make this work?
Yeah, it was a gut check. It was definitely a gut check. It just again came down to that confidence. Like I finally could say to myself and feel comfortable saying, I'm going to do this on my own. Right.
Yeah.
And, that idea had flowed through my head so many times in the past, but the anxiety of the unknown swept it away and said, no, you can't do that. And I
Yeah.
finally conquered that feeling and said, no, I can do this. I can do it. Um, there was also, I had an opportunity to do a nice project, which certainly helped sweeten the deal. And it kind of expedited things very quickly. So that definitely gave me some confidence on day one. But very, very quickly, the phone just started ringing.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear that um, I was going to be able to have some reasonable amount of workload coming in. And then it's just been way more than I ever expected.
It's funny because I think like when we're anticipating all of this, and we're projecting a lot of negativity or like potential for negativity on what we see this transition looking like, and you realize that like where you are right now and like day one of doing that, this is the worst it can ever get, right? It's like, I'm getting ready to leave, we don't really have a plan in place, I'm going off gut, and I'm leaving my business that I've been with for 15 years. Like that's as bad as it can get. And then it's just a matter of you doing what you've been doing for the past 15 years. Like you said, you brought in new customers to the last company you
Yeah,
worked for. And it's like, we anticipate it being so bad. And then it's almost like the decision or saying it out loud is breaking free, like liberating from those chains, and you can finally breathe again. And then it gets like considerably, it's just like having kids. It's a different kind of hard, but it's
hmm,
like once you get that off your chest, it's so much easier just to go through life every single day and be like, I'm working towards where I want to be.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in hindsight, with all this too, working at a job, there comes a level of anxiety that you have on your day to day. What am I doing? Am I making these people happy? Am I progressing? Am I doing all of these things? And I mean, it wasn't overbearing, but looking back, it was there,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and today, here, sitting now, I have none of that,
Yeah.
right? Like there's different anxieties, but they're just so different. And like some of those previous anxieties could be a little, they could hold you back a little bit. They could nick your limb a little bit,
Yeah,
and
because you're
now,
not being 100% of who you want to be. Like in the back of your head, you're always understanding that you're doing this for somebody else's name and like you're doing it the way that they see fit. And I think that it's not like 100% your identity, which you're willing to, like, that's it. It, like you said, it begins and ends with you.
right,
You also can't go directly to the source of that anxiety. It's when you're working for a firm, it's, there's layers to that. Whether or not you're
absolutely,
speaking directly to the client, you're not in charge of how that anxiety, you know, plays out.
right,
And I think that's a big challenge when you are, employee versus an employer. But as you
right.
said, there's other anxieties on the employer side that, any employees would happily not ever deal with.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody.
Did they know, or had you had the conversation with them beforehand that you were thinking of leaving, or was this like, this is news to us?
No, I had the conversation. I actually went on like a little architectural pilgrimage out to Taliesin West, Frank Lloyd Wright's summer home out there, and had a bit of a realization that I needed to do this. And this was last February. Kind of came home from that completely jazzed and spinning from all the inspiration. Kind of realized that this was something I need to do. I spoke with my previous employer, kind of let them know this is what I was thinking. They said, we're surprised but not surprised.
Yeah.
He kind of knew, that maybe this was coming. I guess he said, I'm going to support you. And then all of a sudden there was an opportunity. Somebody I knew was buying a house and said, hey, I'll kind of be your first client. And so all of a sudden, my firm came into fruition extremely quickly, much
Yeah.
faster than I anticipated.
I feel like that might be the best case scenario though. Was there a lot of anxiety with like the quote unquote breakup, like having that conversation?
I mean, I was certainly nervous about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
like I
got to
was
be
very
so
nervous.
hard.
Absolutely, because my previous boss, David Hassine, he was, my mentor, friend. I really cared about what he thought, and I should have known he would have been supportive. But of course, that was such a hard conversation. And when I told him all of this before I even had the opportunity, I just like met with him and told him all the things that were in my mind. We had like a really amazing kind of raw conversation, as like it was not an employee and employer. It was kind of, two friends having a real conversation. And that was a really, really special moment for me. And I really appreciated that so much, so much.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I think about when I left my full time job, but in the parting words of encouragement. But what was it that really encouraged you to walk away from that conversation, going into it so nervous, but leaving kind of really feeling as though this is the right move? If there was
I
anything
mean,
specific.
the specific was he said, I'm going to support you. Like, I'm not surprised. I think you have the ability to do this. I want you to do it here. But if you need to go out and do this on your own, he said, I'm going to support you no matter what you do, 100%.
Mm.
And, just having those words, said to me was like, I felt like I could kind of take on the world. And it swept away all of that anxiety that I had. And, just said, hey, one of the things that's been exciting too is like rebuilding relationships with all of those people, because he used to be my boss. He's not any longer. So now he's a friend.
Mm.
So many people there used to be coworkers and colleagues, but now they're not, they're friends.
Hmm.
So it's been kind of really interesting and fun to rebuild my relationships with some of these people that I've known for 15 years, right? And kind of interact with them in a very different way, right? And I've really enjoyed that in many ways. Um, you know, we don't talk about work like we used to because we don't work at the same place anymore.
Hmm.
And so I think we've some of them were definitely already serious friends, but I think some other are starting to transcend a little bit more into the more friend world than the coworker world, which has been pretty cool and something I definitely did not expect.
I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned that one of your favorite books was, I think it's called the 4 a.m. Club, but your routine, your daily routine, I think that it's important, obviously, having children and owning your own business now. But I'm intrigued to learn a little bit. You mentioned a couple of times that you're an early riser, and I just kind of want to know a little bit more about that, to be honest.
Well, I mean, have you seen or read the 4 a.m. Club?
I have not.
You should check it out. It's kind of an interesting book.
I don't think I want to wake up at 4 a.m. though.
You might have to read it.
Yeah, you're an early riser, right, Nick? I think you get up pretty early.
I am. I'm like, 4:45, 5 a.m.
Oh, that's early. Yeah, that's early. I mean, I'm barely 5 a.m., but
I thought you were 4 a.m.
I don't get up at 4. No, the book is a 4 a.m.
All right, I feel a little better about myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's 4 a.m. is the extreme, but I think I really found that book interesting because, the idea of it is getting up before the world starts, right? Getting out in front of the day. And I cherish that now, even prior to the baby, but getting up, having that hour to kind of set the tone for me and myself to prepare for the day. Because once that, starting gun goes off at 8 o'clock in the morning, some days, I barely even sit down and it's 6 p.m. And so if I don't chart out the things that I know I absolutely need to get done, they'll never get done because something will always kind of get in the way. So the early moments where the world is quiet, there's no emails coming in, there's no phone calls, allows me to sit in my room here, my office here, prepare myself for what I know is to come. And it's always a tidal wave, and that's fine. But it always allows me to identify, okay, these are the things that need to happen today. I have to do this. I have to do this. You don't always get it all done, but it gives me the best chance of accomplishing what really needs to get done. It's also where I like to do a lot of my thinking. I like to go out on runs early in the morning before the sun comes up, especially in the summer. It's nice and cool with the dog. That is like me time. Put the music in, think about what I'm doing, where I'm going, ideas. I end up going for 3, 4, 5 miles. I get to the end and I barely even realized that I was running because I was thinking so much. And it's kind of it's really the only place that I get to have that kind of thought time really by myself because it's the world's quiet for me.
When did you start doing that?
The early rising running stuff, only a couple years ago, I started to do it. I started to realize how much more. I was always kind of an early riser, but I started to structure my mornings better. I used to just get up, make breakfast, watch the local news, which I still do sometimes. But it made I started to learn that there was a much better use of my time early in the morning in terms of preparation for my day. And once I started doing it, I realized how important it was. And when I don't get it, I notice it throughout my day for sure.
Do you feel that it's so? And I don't think that it's this way. And I think that people have to be careful of this, where it's like it almost sounds as though you're waking up to be able to structure the rest of your day. But I also think that it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's got to be important that it doesn't have to be like an act of work where I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start figuring out how to structure my day for the most efficiency, where it's like, now I'm just adding an additional 3 hours of work to my day. Like this is like a very freeing mental exercise for you where you're not necessarily engaging in everything else from a work perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. You definitely need to find what works for you. Like I'm not doing billable work at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? It's really the me time. It's thinking, it's strategizing. Sometimes it's just working out or running, but it's just being more intentional about those morning hours and trying to set yourself up for success, And I think too, the working out, in the morning, it always gives me more energy throughout the day.
Yeah.
Right? It gets me going. It propels me into the day. I just always feel so much better when I move my body in the morning. And I'm not a person that can do it at night.
Do you do it on the weekends?
I do. Yep. Not quite as early, but I still like to get up, and especially now with the kid. Yeah. Like I try to get up before the kid every single day just to have an hour before he gets up because the energy in the house changes once he's awake. It's not a bad thing, but it just changes.
Do you?
The ability to be in deep work mode is, I mean, it's just a game changer. And I find that airplanes for me, it's
Yep,
like,
same.
I put some music on and I can sit there and work the entire flight and
Yep.
get a tremendous amount of work done. Um, I usually work out in the morning. One morning a week I don't. So I come in the office same time. I just get here at 5:30, and it's I got an hour and a half of just deep work, and I can get more done in that hour and a half than I can half my day. And but then it's during the day, it's just a gong show. And
Yeah.
and to your point, if I don't have just a simple to-do list, my brain goes in a million different directions. And the moment I'm like, oh, I should get back to that person, and I'll just pivot and then go write an email responding to someone that reached out to me yesterday or in that moment. So for me, I the morning thing, easy. I'm up early. I like to work out. I try to switch to middle of the day workouts because everyone's like, "Oh, you'll get this burst of energy in the middle of the day." I couldn't do it. I'm like,
Yeah, no way.
it's just there's not, and certainly not going to happen at the end of the day. So I got to stick with the morning. But for me now, it's just I'm thinking about, okay, I know I have all these things going on. I work really well in deep work and I work really well with a to-do list. But now it's, do I just have this running to-do list all week? Or do I block out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for individual like focus? And that's what I've been, this is like literally active like the last week, where it's all right, for now on, Tuesdays are going to be strictly Modern Craftsman podcast content. That's it. Like I have all these sales emails I got to get back. I'm like, nope, that's for Thursday.
Hmm.
I'll focus on that. I'm curious to see what my what my capacity, how my capacity will change. Because earlier today I looked at my to-do list. I'm like, I'm done. Like I've finished everything I was supposed to get done today.
Wow, good for
Which
you.
didn't mean like I had nothing left. It was just, hey, you said that these are the things that you're going to do on Tuesday. You've
Right,
accomplished it.
right.
So it'd be interesting to see if that truly helps or not.
I'd love to hear you maybe talk a little bit more about that moving forward because um, I would love to know if that works because I would love to potentially institute something like that myself. We used to, at the office, try to do some focus times where,
Mm-hmm.
twice a week in the afternoon, there was no meetings during certain times. And
Mm-hmm.
we tried to set some parameters around the office to really allow
Yeah.
us to have that kind of deep work time. And it had some success. It's harder to do in a bigger office.
Yeah.
But I've definitely thought about that on my own too. Like, should I be setting certain times of the day or the week that I don't answer emails or I don't have
Mm-hmm.
client calls or
I,
um,
I'm a full believer in it. I've messed around with it in all different kind of formats. Previously, in my calendar itself, I just said, you know, I'm blocking out 2 hours twice a day where it's deep work, no interruptions. And I sit in my office and I don't answer, like my email's closed, everything gets closed, and I have to work on something and just do that completely uninterrupted. And same thing for with meetings. I basically blocked out of my calendar, certain times I would take meetings and then just give everyone the calendar link. It's like, if you need a
hmm.
meeting with me here, you can have a half hour slot with me. And that's the only time I'd be available.
And your staff abides by that?
Well, I think it's just at the end of the day that there's no option. They'll
Hmm.
ask me like, "Hey, can you meet earlier? Can you do this?" And of course, like I'm not, I'm not rigid in the sense like, nope, you have to abide by it. But I think by setting the expectation up front, then it just naturally gravitates toward that. Where
Hmm.
it's, if you're constantly doing it, you've set this structure and this is what works for you. A good friend of mine did it. I called him one day. I was like, "Hey, I want to talk through this deal." He goes, "We got to talk tomorrow." I'm like, "Oh, my bad. I didn't realize you're busy." He goes, "No, I just don't talk about anything money in the afternoon. I only do that in the morning."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And he goes like, "Yeah, I
Hmm.
just like my brain. I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm winding down. I don't want to talk about money. Like, it's just not, it's
Hmm.
not how I operate." But I would say, I mean, regardless of what, like, I don't think there's one format that works for everyone, but I think that having some sort of repeatable format, but really specifically, like, how can you dedicate deep work, and you'll find like that's where you make the most progress. And I've kind of bought into all the stupid Instagram hacks. I got the timer Alex Hormozy has that actually works great. It's like this little timer on your desk you set, and it's like, I want 45 minutes of uninterrupted time. Just seeing that thing tick there. Number one, it's like watching you. It's like, don't touch your phone. Like, you said 45 minutes. I'm not done yet. But the other thing it does is it makes me realize just how long shit takes.
Interesting.
Where it's like I'm working and I think I'm getting a ton done, and I look down and I'm like, wait, that was 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow. I was like, I mean, Tyler, you and I, like, with all the stuff we've been doing with the podcast, it's, it's like, oh, I'll knock that out. And it's like,
no, it's going to take a little longer.
It's like, wow. Man. But I think when you to like starting a business, having free time, you talk about it, and having the freedom, I think without doing this, because speaking from my experience, without structuring this stuff, your freedom gets eaten up real quick. And it won't always be the same thing. It won't always be, oh, Matt works until 9:00 at night. It will then be like, oh yeah, he's home every day at 6, or he's available at 6, but now he's working Saturdays. Or maybe it's not either of that, and it's, yeah, but he hasn't taken a vacation in 3 years. And I've been that person on all ends of it. And it sucks. Like, I've, the last year I went through deep, valleys of burnout, because I was just trying to do way too much. And my attention was just being spread so thin. It's like exercising. They say, you can exercise all you want, but if you don't let your body recover, it's pointless.
I feel like now is the time to start implementing those. And yeah, you're going to have to adapt, and you're going to have to alter them. But if you can structure a successful business that is, not an extreme investment of your time, where you're just putting way too much time into your business, and you could start structuring those things now and not create a lucrative business where you're really cheating the amount of time you're putting into it, I think that you'll be that much more successful moving forward. Because if you can't do it now, as you get busier, how are you going to handle it? It's like, oh, I'll hire people, and it just gets more complicated. So yeah, I think like starting to implement those ideas and structure your day as you see fit now, and ensuring that your business is profitable and sustainable based on those constraints now, I think is going to be like immensely helpful as you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could see this writing on the wall, and it's so easy to just work. There's always more to do. There's always something else I can be looking at, from a project standpoint to a business planning standpoint to another event I could be going to try to make a contact with this person. And this past fall, I was working a significant amount, 60, 70 hours a week, 6-7 days a week. It's, it's new, it's exciting. It's, I'm trying to get things going, but, I'm 42. I have a newborn. I can't do that right now. So I need to reassess everything. And I mean, that's also one of the most exciting things about kind of being on my own, is like, I have to, out of necessity, reassess every time that I need to do something new. Like, how am I approaching this? Am I doing this because this is the way I did it prior? Or am I doing this because it's the best use of my time, or the best way to do this thing right in front of me right now? So like, having that wherewithal to be like questioning all of that and making sure I am investing my time in appropriate places is really important.
Yeah.
Like, one of my first story things is, it's silly, but like, end of month 1 came, and I was like, holy shit, I got to send an invoice. And I didn't even have an invoice template. And I spent an entire day designing an invoice. And I was like, that was a waste of time. You know what I mean? Because I wanted my logo to be the appropriate fit,
And guess how long they looked at the invoice? Enough to hit the pay now button.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like, I think about that. I'm like, okay, well, I can't do that. And there's way more things you could do that on a much, much bigger level, where you could spend days over the course of a month working on something that gives you zero results.
I'll give you, two pieces of advice, asked for or not. But earlier you said my 5-year plan is not to have a 5-year plan. I was that way forever. And
Okay.
until, I don't know, maybe it must have been over 2 years ago at this point, I started working with a coach once a month and just chatting through like what my vision was for the company. And he asked me the same thing. I'm like, oh, I don't have one. He goes, then how the fuck do you know where you're going? And I was like, well, I know. He's like, I get that you have this vision and I get that this is what you want to do, but you need to understand like what are the things that allow you to get there. If you want to be doing, if you're only, we'll just use revenue, for example. If you're doing $1 million in revenue and you want to be doing $2 million in revenue, that's not just I'm just going to do more work. How much are you spending on marketing? You need to double that. Well, I don't know what I'm spending. Well, until you know what you're spending, you can't double it. And you can't double it if you don't actually have the cash to do it. So there's all these parts and pieces that are obviously intertwined. And I think for me, that was when I started breaking it down and realizing, hey, this is my revenue goal, because at this revenue, at this margin, this will net me this much money for my family. And work backwards from there, and then realizing what that meant from a monthly perspective, a weekly perspective, a per employee perspective, and then just got to a point where I'm looking at all these numbers on this dashboard of understanding, when I tweak this, that tweaks, or understanding it's like, hey, every 250 potential leads that come in, 2 of them convert. Wow. And when I went through that math, I'm like, wait, what? And it's, I'm talking like someone that fills out the form online that is like clearly not a customer. But when you start going through that, it made me realize where I needed to focus my energy. The other thing is what you said about, creating the invoice template, making, being at another networking event. I have these love-hate relationships with these projects because, in my mind, and until I'm blue in the face, I will tell everyone that there is an ROI and I can't measure it, but you have to trust me. and everyone's like, sure, I guess. And I don't know why I say, because I don't even know if I believe, like half the time, I don't know if I believe it. But it's important to me in the way we present ourselves, right? We have these booklets that we hand out. They're in black envelopes. Those black envelopes are brand, like none of it, quote unquote, matters, but it matters to me and it matters to the experience that we're going to present. Just like when you're a full design architecture studio, it's that entire experience, right? Yeah. So these are the things that are important. But what I found is that I was spending a tremendous amount of time trying to do this when copy isn't my strong suit. Brand design is not my strong suit. I understand I understood what I wanted, but I was trying to do it myself. I'll give you a great example. I'm getting it next week so I can talk about it. But I created a book from a project that we built, and we professionally shoot every project that we built once a week. So by the end of a project, I have anywhere from 50 to 70 folders of each week of construction progress. For 2 years since this project's been completed, it's been 2.5 now, I've wanted to take those and create a book, a coffee table book for my client. And I tried to do it with a couple people. They couldn't figure out how to best do it. I started to do it. I was like, this is I cannot be spending my time doing this. This is insane. And finally I was like, you know what? I need to delegate this, and I need to find someone that it does make sense. And I asked around, and a friend of mine was like, oh, I know a publishing company that makes books, and they actually can do this stuff. They do crazy projects where they'll print stuff overnight for you. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And here are the folders. And they wrote back, and they're like, hey, we can have a draft done. We need 4 days for a draft, and on approval, I can have it shipped out next week. I was like, wait, did you see how many photos? They're like, yeah. Do you want them laid out any specific way? I'm like, just chronologically, and just take the ones that look the best. Like, yeah, no problem. 4 days later, I have a 140-page book fully laid out, every photo, and my point here is there's going to be things like the invoice. There's going to be things like the experience and these bits and pieces of the business, but they need to be. You need to delegate that and delegate it when it's appropriate, and focus on the core offering that is your business, because ultimately that's what will, when that fails, the client experience goes down. When you don't have the book, the client experience just remains neutral. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good advice. That's great advice. Yeah.
I still don't think you need a 5-year plan in place. I'll tell you, like what Nick said's decent, but I think
decent.
You like at the heart.
I don't think you need a 5-year plan. You just need to know where you're going.
No, you need to know where you are.
Have a North Star.
Because if you know where you are, which nobody knows where they are, you can determine how you want to move forward. If you fully understand all of your numbers and the implications of the decisions that you're making today, you can make a decision as to where you want to be in 5 years. Just know where you are now. Like that, to me, that's as important. You can make a decision on where you want to be, but like understand how your business is impacted on a daily basis and how much time you're putting into your business. And I think it'll give you a pretty good indication of where you need to go.
Yeah, I'm just getting to that point myself. I finally have a bookkeeper helping me with my books. I have a financial planner that's helping me. I'm meeting with her for a second time tomorrow. So I'm finally getting the foundational elements in place with my business. I was able to see profit and loss reports for the last couple of months, see where all the money is going in terms of what I'm spending it on. So that was pretty cool and eye-opening to see all that. And I need to kind of continue to build that up and spend more time kind of looking at that. And I really do want to try to figure out, I have a kind of a leads tracker that a friend gave me. I really do need to spend some time filling that out to try to track where the leads are coming through, how they're passing through me, where are they coming from? Because you do end up spending a lot of time going out, meeting with people, writing proposals, and then you never hear from them again, right? And I'm curious to see
what's the follow-up point? What, where did that is every lead that comes through your website trash? It's those things that, Tyler said, understanding where you are. For me, that's what what we determined is every lead that comes through our website, absolute, they're not self-qualifying correctly because we don't have the right information there. At one point, like we were getting a tremendous amount of people just thinking that they were a good client. And it was because we didn't narrow down the information appropriately.
Interesting.
But to your point, and to Tyler's point, like understanding where you're at and understanding, the stuff that is moving, right? The leads coming in, for me, I don't have a great system for lead tracking. I have one that works for me. It's something that's on my little forever to-do list of create something that's better and more automated. But right now it works. I have a list of active opportunities and I will ruthlessly follow up with you until you tell me no. And that's, and I have found that has been the best thing that I ever implemented, because I would have clients that I wouldn't talk to for months and months. Some didn't even respond to me. And finally at one point they were like, hey, sorry, it's been so long. But now we're ready. And it's only because I would just follow up them. They would tell me, hey, reach out in a couple weeks. All right, no problem. Moving that 2 weeks, and I will follow up with you 2 weeks from this moment right now.
Interesting.
And just understand and offer and say, hey, seems like you're not interested, but if there's anything I could do to help this process, let me know. And I had one client say, I was waiting on the architect. I'm not getting anywhere with them. Maybe you can help. Yeah, no problem. Let me have a conversation with the architect. Maybe the architect isn't getting the information they need, and I can be that person that helps get it.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. That's super. I've had a couple of experiences like that too, where people have kind of gone dark, and I've sent a follow up email as like a Hail Mary, and
Hmm.
then all of a sudden they surface. I'm kind of starting on a project like that right now, but yeah, I think it's all about following up, being top of mind for people,
Yeah.
and again, like respecting that life does get busy, right?
Yeah.
Around the holidays and stuff like that, people's life gets super crazy, and sometimes I think their intention is probably to get back to you, but something else just kind of keeps getting in their way. So if you can get back to the top of their inbox, you have definitely a better shot at kind of closing the deal, or getting to that next step.
Yeah.
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 I
Top of
think
mind. Huge.
lessons learned again from building your own place or working on your own projects. It's like even sometimes making decisions with my wife where I'm like, well, now I know why a client doesn't respond to me because I'm 10 feet from her and I can't get the answer to the question because something else comes up. So, like, it's not just client ignorance, it's that life's extremely chaotic and I should probably um, have a little bit more empathy for the situation that everyone's in.
Absolutely, absolutely. I could say one thing, like in the decision making with our project and my wife. When we started our project, I was like, I know every single product that's going into this house. And guess what she said?
Wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah, wrong. And that is where I learned compromise.
Dude, Matt, we are starting our renovation, like actually starting in just a few weeks now. Um, and when we started this project, my wife was like, I literally don't care about anything. I just want this light fixture somewhere in the house, and I want a Speed Queen washer dryer. And I think
Nice.
there might have been like one other thing. I'm like, great. And I just ran with it. And we're in finishes selections, and renderings are coming together. And then we had a conversation about it. She's like, I don't like any of that. And I thought you should just do whatever you want. I'm like, nope, nope, no, 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 no. This is like I'm not gonna just do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I thought we were on the same page. She's like,
Wow.
I would never do that. I'm like,
Wow.
well, what would you do? She's like, I don't have the capacity to think about it right now. I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, we will well, let's put a pin in that. And are you good with the layout? And then that was wrong. So I was like, all right, you tell me, we'll fix the layout. Now we get the layout done. And I'm like, all right, at some point we need to carve out a weekend and chat about what we think this is going to look like, because I have a
Mm.
very clear picture in my mind. But my wife's also very practical. So she'll be like, whatever cleans the easiest. I'm like,
Yep.
kind of want my house to look like it belongs in a magazine all the time. She goes, you have 4 children under the age of 10. You're not living in a magazine house. I was like, could I do it for the photos? But yeah, compromise is
Yes.
a great lesson learned.
Yes, absolutely. Something we all need to learn a lot about in life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We appreciate your time coming and hanging. And obviously, you have a lot going on, a lot on your plate. It sounds like it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very excited. There's a lot coming up for in 2025. I got a lot of exciting projects ahead. A lot of cool stuff. I'm very pumped for the year ahead. It's going to be a busy year for sure, but a lot of fun stuff. A lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's really neat even, and I think it comes probably with experience and maturity, but just from the outset of starting your business to create a brand that leaves the door open to multiple opportunities, I think is really cool and a really good takeaway for a lot of people that I think most people probably don't do because, a lot of times their business is their identity, it's their namesake, and they're not necessarily creating it to leave a door open for collaboration. So I think that's really cool, and hats off to you for that.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I knew from day one that I didn't want to be just kind of. I was going to call it Arnold Architects, but that just did not seem very enticing.
When you launched the Arnold I didn't even mention this. Genius. I
Really?
read it.
Oh,
I read your post, and I was like, dude, so good. Like
wow.
from so many like just for so many reasons. I think it's very well done. I'll leave it at
Thank
that.
you.
Very well done.
Thank you. I had a great partner that helped me design Agency Bell. She was a kind of branding partner. She did a great job. And she really kind of challenged me and pushed me in a lot of directions and, asked me a lot of questions that I wasn't prepared to answer at first. And it took me a little bit of time to kind of really think about it and how I wanted to approach some of this. So I was grateful to be pushed outside of my comfort zone because it's certainly easiest just to run down the path that I knew. And even starting all this out, actually, I started building my own website. Like every architect can brand themselves and build their own website. And I very quickly was like, well, I can't do this. I have no
Mhm.
idea what I'm doing
Good,
here.
yeah, good on you for realizing that.
Yeah, and so I'm glad I brought in a partner, and I'm super excited about it.
What's a good website for everyone to check you out?
It's arnoldand.com, ARNOLDAND.com.
There we go. I appreciate
Yeah,
you, man. I'll
yeah,
see you
same
soon.
here.
I'll
Thank
get-
you.
I'll hit you up for coffee.
All right, I love it.
Yeah, thank you so
Can't wait
much.
to hear the next one.
Sweet. Matt's a good dude. I had met him when he was at his scene, and then we've been trying to find a project together since he left. But
Yeah, it's got to be so hard to be with the business for 14 years and
oh
then be
yeah,
like, hey, listen, either to go elsewhere or start your own thing, especially you have a good relationship with them. That's like, I mean,
and
that's
a
like
great
breaking
firm.
up
Yeah,
with a significant other that you've, known for 14, 15 years. That's a substantial amount of time. But really cool to see where he's going. I like his model a lot. I think that that does not come without experience and a lot of maturation with yourself. So super cool.
make sure you head over to monocraftsman.co, sign up for our newsletter. We send out a weekly email, a little bit behind the scenes, what we got working on, what we're working on, and sharing a little bit more in depth about what's going on in my business. But the only way you can get that content is by signing up for the newsletter. And if you guys want to join us live in Omaha, Nebraska, June 19th through the 23rd, you got to register. contractorcoalitionsummit.com. Myself, Tyler, Brad Levitt, Morgan Molitor, as well as Mark Williams, who recently joined the Contractor Coalition Summit. We're going to be there, and there's a bunch of stuff going on, but head over to the website, check it out. If you have questions, reach out to any of us. Happy to answer. And if we're chatting through DM, I can get you a discount code to see you in Omaha. Until next week, guys, we'll see you then.
Trust my mama, you're no match for my bad karma.